You know what's wild about Playtest 7? It's amazing how OWI can get something so right.
And it's still up north there, Honcho?
Yeah. And at the same time, so utterly wrong. How's it going, guys? My name's Honcho, and welcome to my rundown of Squad's latest playtest on the Infantry Combat Overhaul. Now, I may not dazzle you with special effects and distract you with shiny gameplay and memes, but I will tell you guys the hard facts and points about the Infantry Combat Overhaul no one else has the balls to. Because whether or not you guys like the ICO, it's coming, and this will be the future of Squad. It's just down to us and our honest feedback to help shape it to be the game we all still love and enjoy. As a lot of you guys know, I have extensively taken part in every single playtest for the Infantry Combat Overhaul that there has been to offer, and I think it's because of the sheer amount of time and hours I've put in terms of gameplay, watching others play it, researching and discussing it with members of the community. I'm really starting to get not only a good grasp of it, but I'm starting to see the bigger picture. But like most things, when you really start getting your eye in, you also start to see the cracks in the wall. But that's not a bad thing. In fact, that's exactly what this needs right now. People who can see this for what it is, without the rose-tinted glasses and getting distracted by all of the new shiny stuff. Don't get me wrong, Playtest 7 has been by far the best playtest yet. It came with a huge patch note list that would rival my usual patch note videos. It also contained a nice chunk of bug fixes, but most importantly, every single squad faction is now in the ICO to test and try. The only downside to that is it has felt incredibly rushed, but I'll get into that later. One thing I will say for anyone playing the ICO, if you want one tip that will make things far more enjoyable, simply raise your field of view from 90 to 105. You don't feel as tunnel visioned, and it makes a lot of the Iron Sight kits a lot more usable. So, as mentioned before, all factions are now in the ICO, and for most of it, it's been pretty smooth sailing. All of the remaining factions brought in have been done so pretty much flawlessly. Militia, for example, feels like it has had a new sense of life breathed into it despite only being overhauled less than 6 months ago. And the mix of weapons, scopes and other bits makes them an absolute joy to use. For me, they are my second favourite faction to use right now. The AKS-74U is an absolute monster in close quarter situations, as it should be. But it actually feels fun to use, and that's the main point. The M16 with the 3x optic is another absolute masterpiece if you enjoy picture-in-picture scopes. There's literally something for everyone in Militia. And in Vanilla Squad, that was never really the case, was it? The Brits have also been implemented well, and their weapon handling is somewhat more enjoyable than other factions, but not quite there yet. The Alcans perform nicely and is a nice size to see and use. The Susats, however, is just a little bit too big. I mean, look how much bigger it is compared to the Marksman kit, which is a stronger magnification. But you're looking through a toilet tube on that one. You could get away with the Susat sight being that big if it wasn't for the weapon misalignment and then taking 4 to 5 seconds to actually see what you're doing when you ADS. So in live practice, it makes this kit very uncomfortable to use. Oh, and a heads up for NLAW enjoyers and users. You now need to make sure that you keep your launcher in direct attack and not predictive line of sight, as the sway and misalignment changes basically sees you fire off your rocket and it flies off to the side. Now, add in the super slow ADS time, you haven't got time to correct that. So direct attack is a handy workaround for this more annoying issue than anything else. Now, the Australian faction has been done beautifully. They use the same main optic as the Brits, but their Elcan is adjustable, so you can run it as a 1x or a 4x, and boy oh boy have they nailed this. It's so smooth, so clean, and feels just so right. There's a small bug for the machine gunners when firing whilst the scope is in 4x, but other than that, it's amazing. Even the hollow sights are great fun to use if you prefer them. Of all of the factions, Australia is by far the most fun to use, and a lot of people who I have spoken to have also said the same, and then followed it up by saying that it feels the closest to base game Gunplay, but with all of the ICO features attached to it, which proves the point that if things like sway and misalignment is dialed back properly and weapon handling is somewhat similar to Vanilla Squad, the ICO can and will work. You see, as Australia, you can't just 180 snap onto someone and one tap whilst you are shooting at them, like some of you guys are so paranoid about, because the suppression actually does its job. The People's Liberation Army were also a fun faction to use as well, even if it looked like their optics had been either made by Wish.com and then left in the sun for a little bit too long. Again, weapon handling felt a bit more enjoyable than a lot of other factions, but the iron sights and the hollow especially felt very good for People's Liberation Army. The hat kit though, yeah, that's just a bit weird. Now, Insurgents is where things start getting a little bit muddy. As we all know, they don't have that many optics through their ranks. I think it's only the SKS, SVD, the Sniper Mosin and the AK-74 that has an optic. Everything else is iron sight. And that's fine, but some of the iron sight weapons felt like they took an absolute eternity to ADS. And when irons are supposed to be the king of close quarters, it's a bit of a kick in the balls. However, some of the weapons do dish out a lot of suppression, especially the Mosin. That weapon really makes you put your head down. The picture-in-picture optics could do with being made a little bit bigger, as they are absolutely tiny, but I do like that cracked glass effect on the PU scopes, if you put your face up against the screen to see it. Now, Insurgents have always done well on tight close quarter based maps, and they will continue to do so, but any map where there's long angles or big open areas, they are going to get mopped up quite heavily. So perhaps as things go on, maybe a lot of the layers they are in will need to either be adjusted or changed just to help them fit within the game. And now we fall into the absolute pit of misery, that is the Middle Eastern Alliance. Now yes, I know, they were in the last playtest, but OWI has made some pretty serious changes to them for Playtest 7, and I can say with the utmost confidence that they have pulled off the absolute impossible, and made them worse. OWI claim to have reduced the inertia and vertical recoil, but in addition increased weapon misalignment and given them a new recoil curve. And I can only hope it's bugged because it's absolutely shocking. It's so bad that some of them actually shake your whole screen worse than artillery does. I have always been a big lover of the Middle Eastern Alliance. After all, I'm British, I like underdogs. But I understood that they were a bit of a server killer and a very Marmite faction. After this one though, no one wanted to play them. They're like the Insurgents in terms of gameplay. They're only good when heavily dug in on defense. Only difference is, the Insurgents can actually attack by ambushing you. Middle Eastern Alliance, you literally can't move a muscle if you intend on using your weapon within the next 60 seconds. Don't get me wrong, the MG3 is fantastic to use and so is the RPG-29, but the G3 has a serious problem. Hopefully, for Playtest 8, they can steer the Middle Eastern Alliance into a better direction. But long term, it may be a better idea to change their weaponry to fall in line a little bit more like the rest of Squad, especially when most maps and layers they are on consist of mostly close quarters infantry environments, in which a battle rifle, being the G3, is going to be no good for. Maybe on maps like Mutahar and Fallujah where they feature so heavily, they could get the HK-33, which is basically a 5.56 variant of the G3, and instead of the HK-51, they get the MP5. People would love that because it's new tech in the game and a bit of variety. But then on the bigger maps like Talil and Kohat, they can use the G3s because that's where the battle rifle will start to come into its own. You know, Australia has something similar to this. If you play Cora RAS V3, Australian Defence Force uses the AUG rather than the F-88s. There's a fun little fact for you there. A layer that I like to sneak in my servers every now and then. But back on point, giving them something like the HK-33 will make the faction more usable and enjoyable for everyone and will inject new life into Squad's most unloved faction. Now, as we move into the rest of the features here, I will say, Suppression, it's absolutely fantastic. It is a masterpiece. It's immersive, it's powerful, and it's a usable tool. It's done its job, mixing with the post-penetrating effect, showing bullets coming through walls, and it's just magnificent. It really does hook you in, and sometimes you will find yourself ducking at your desk. There is a small bug where your screen can stay bugged for 15 to 30 seconds after being shot at, which is very annoying, and sometimes someone's rifle nowhere near you can just keep your screen like someone shoved Vaseline all over it. But when you see the effect of being suppressed from a mortar and how smoothly it rolls off, it's beautiful. Doesn't give me any headaches or eye strain, but it still does its job. Whereas the bug I mentioned before, I physically cannot look at my screen while it's permanently blurred. So hopefully that one gets cleared up pretty soon. Picture-in-picture optics are also coming along very nicely, but optimization and picture quality is still poor. However, I can see steps have been taken to improve it. Some optics like the Marine SDO and the Aussie HK417 optic, they are still garbage to use due to them being really small and they look very plasticky and tacky. But the main issue with a lot of these optics is the scope glare. There's no reason to have this. I mean, a lot of these optics have eye cups, and that's the whole point in them. And as I've been saying for a long time now, the peripheral blur, it just needs to go. And speaking of blur, it's also ruining any iron sight and holographic weapon. The fact that my rear sight post on iron sights is blurred to buggery, that needs to be removed, especially when it's a peephole sight. And then mix in the fact that when you shoot, you can't see anything because of all the blur in front of the gun. So you got blur at the back and blur at the front. What am I supposed to do? It's just too gamey. I get that they want us to use suppression, but all of these blur effects, the only thing we can effectively kill is our frames per second. It does seem though that some weapons are affected more than others when it comes to this blur. Oh, and this blur effect when you're sat idle, that also just looks naff. Now, weapon handling is a bit Jekyll and Hyde here. For Australia, it is absolutely fantastic. The sway, misalignment, ADS, and steady times all feel like they are in a fantastic place. We all know that MEA are at the exact opposite end of this scale, and then the rest of the factions are spread out somewhere in the middle. We'll kind of use your imagination to work out where they are. I think the sway and weapon steady times do need to be reduced slightly, or a lot, to at least make them somewhat more like Australia. Even at full stamina, pulling your gun up and then still having to wait 5 seconds before you can even think about shooting someone who's 200 meters away because you can't see because of the weapon misalignment, that needs to be dialed back a fair bit. 1 to 3 seconds, depending on your stamina, I would feel would be a great balance to start with, and would definitely take it away from feeling as extreme as it is. Iron sight and hollow kits need to be shorter still, as they are supposed to be tailored for close quarter battle now. So there's absolutely no point in super slow ADS for the irons, because that's just making them pointless. Oh, and this over the stock quick aim thing, it just needs to be binned off. The more I use it, the more I hate it. At bare minimum, make it a key-bound feature, but for mechanics like this, the AK-12 canted sight was still the best by a country margin. Back when they tested that, you had this central point of reference and the guns weren't as wobbly. But the biggest issue with all of these weapon handling issues is it's making certain weapons and certain factions unusable to the point where, as it feels in Battlefield, unless you're using a certain weapon, you literally don't stand a chance. And this is what's frustrating people so much, especially myself, because that goes against what squad is. It's 50 versus 50. Both teams should have a somewhat equal chance to win, even with asymmetrical equipment. But when some factions and weapons are plain unusable, it really goes against the whole ethos of squad. Yes, they want to slow down the gameplay in squad and encourage people to play together. That's what all of the other features have done. But at the end of the day, squad is a first-person shooter at its core, so the gunplay has to be fun, engaging, immersive, and intuitive. And right now, some factions are almost there, and some are nowhere near. One of the biggest positives I will say though, is the change of people's mentality as we all get used to these changes. People are more willing to work together. More people are taking up the defensive role, as you get a monumental advantage by being set up now. But as someone who spent thousands of hours being a squad leader, I'm finding more people are listening and willing to stick together. I had a beautiful game as Militia on Black Coast, defending Chernikov's shoreline. There were 3 squads on defense. I mean, that's just an amazing feat on its own. And my squad took the proactive role to take out enemy attacking fobs whilst we were helping defend. If the footage is good enough, I will stick the round in its own video at some point on YouTube, because it was just an amazing game with only 9 deaths throughout our squad in a game that took nearly 90 minutes. but on point. This mentality has found its way back over into Vanilla Squad. On my server, Dead on Dismount, the amount of teamwork, communication and cohesion has increased dramatically. People are actively changing the way that they play in preparation for the ICO going live. The mentality shift in vanilla games is evident to see, and I'll be honest, I'm all for it. More people are helping each other, and that to me is an amazing thing on its own. One thing I will say though that is absolutely ridiculous is the weapon movement whilst holding an ADSing with a pistol. I hope it's a bug because this looks absolutely atrocious. Performance and general bugs are still a major issue in the playtest. Now all the factions have been brought forwards, hopefully they can be dealt with in a timely manner and not left to fester and rot and make its way into the live game, which has always been the case in OWI's history. So, guys, let's hope you could break the mold with this update. But on a very positive note, the sneak preview we got of the new map, Sanchin Islands, whilst it's probably about the size of Mutahar and it's not finished yet, OWI have done an astounding job of it. You don't actually feel that it is a smaller map because it's so immersive. There's so many amazing areas for intense infantry fights. All of the brush and bracken to hiding and ambush, and the verticality from some of the different buildings really adds to it all. The power station area is my current favourite location. I've already had some great exchanges fighting on the rooftops, and I'm extremely excited to see this one finished. Look, all in all, Playtest 7, whilst feeling very rushed, was a successful playtest. Things are heading in a positive direction, and you can see where things have progressed and some things have been left behind. I know OWI have been actively asking for our feedback and feelings on this, so please make sure to fill in the feedback forms if you have taken part in the playtests and not just sat on Reddit and watched stuff. Thank you all for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe for more squad guides, gameplay and updates, as I've got plenty more videos on this topic to come out in the future. Take care, and I'll catch you all in my next video or in my squad server, Dead or Dismount. Good night.